หลังจากที่ข้อตกลง Good Friday บรรลุผลสถานการณ์ความรุนแรงในไอร์แลนด์เหนือยุติลงเกือบเด็ดขาด 20 ปีที่แล้วเกิดความรุนแรงจนมีผู้เสียชีวิต 300 คนทุกปี แต่ในช่วง 12 เดือนที่ผ่านมาไม่มีผู้เสียชีวิตมีแต่ผู้ได้รับบาดเจ็บบ้างเท่านั้น
What is the situation in Northern Ireland today like?
Situation in Northern Ireland today is wonderful. Full of problems, but wonderful. 20 years ago, our political parties wouldn't sit together. So my job was at that time running between the parties. Now I can sit in the same room as them. That's a really good thing. And tourism has developed, the economy has developed. We are not home and dry. We have a lot of very difficult work to do. No one is 100% happy. And I suppose I've come to accept that within the context of our peace process at least, if you don't feel any pain, you're probably not in a peace process. But the pain that you feel in a peace process is so much less and so much more human and caring than it is when you're at war. Because the pain I'm feeling is that I've given a little bit of my power away, but my children are safe. So the trade-off was good.
It has been 16 years since the Good Friday Agreement.
Yes.
From then until today. Northern Ireland today, is it something you had envisioned it to be?
No, I couldn't have imagined it. I couldn't possibly. Maybe about 10 years ago you could sort of see it coming, but 20 years ago I couldn't have seen it happening in this way at all. It's absolutely amazing how it has panned out. I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased the conflict is over. I'm so pleased that political parties can dialogue. I'm so pleased that relationships in all of Ireland and between Ireland and Britain have changed so much. They still need further change. It's not perfect, but it's so much better than it was.
Looking back, do you think that the violence on the part of the IRA actually helped nail down the peace process into the direction that Sinn Féin or IRA wanted it to be?
Obviously it did. The IRA role was the major factor because it was the IRA negotiated the peace with the British government. The IRA was politics by another way, as armed struggle is. If armed struggle isn't politically driven, then it's gangs, so we were political activists. We were political activists in the street. When we were captured and imprisoned, we were still political activists. We moved with our minds in the jail, and we came out of jail politically better equipped to deal with the situation. Very many of the people who I spent time in prison with are currently elected representatives. Some of them are ministers in the government. But there's nothing unique about that. But almost every political leader in Israel, especially at the formulation of the Israeli state, were all former terrorists. Jomo Kenyatta from Kenya, he was a terrorist. So according to the British label, he led the freedom struggle. And we have Nelson Mandela. You must remember Nelson Mandela was captured at the bomb making factory, so although he turned into being a great statesman. So all I would say to you is, we're all political activists. Me, I don't feel myself lesser for not participating in armed struggle. Armed struggle at one stage was a correct thing to do because the conditions allowed it. The conditions don't dictate that. It has to be dialogue now.
So for you, the ends justify the means?
Well, a bit cold, yes, but I couldn't argue that. Finally, it looks like that has been the situation, but I wouldn't be cold. A lot of people died, a lot of people suffered, a lot of people continue to suffer. I'm very sorry about that. But I still consider the struggle had to take place. And when we look back on it, I think our people have still supported us in it, and we are now currently Our representatives are currently the biggest political party in Ireland, and I can only hope that that will continue, because if it does continue, we will ensure the equality of everyone. No one will be favoured above the other, and hopefully, see, it's not enough to have peace. You have to have peace with all other equitable things in society. People had to be catered for. Peace isn't enough. It has to be peace with justice and equality for all citizens. We would want that for everyone.
But Northern Ireland today is peaceful.
Yes, I know.
Its economy is doing great. Isn't this good for everyone?
Oh, it's good, but it's a temporary measure. What I want to see is a united Ireland, a united economy, united people, a united political entity, which it always was forever up until the start of the 20th century when the British partitioned it. All I wanted is a return to that. And see if the people in Ireland don't want it, then that's okay. But I won't stop struggling to try and get it, but I'm not going to fight for it.
If your goal is not completed yet, why not take up arms again?
Because we are very confident with the rise in electoral support that we will get it by other means.
How do you feel when people call you terrorists?
I don't like it. However, if they're calling me a terrorist in the same way as Nelson Mandela was referred to as a terrorist, that'd suit me.
How do you see yourself? Freedom fighter?
No, I see myself as an ordinary man who did the right thing. In Western Europe, there was a war, there were wars fought in the start of the century and the Second World War. And people fought against governments then too, you know. I mean, you had resistance to the Germans, you had the resistance in Norway and France and different countries. People don't like to be colonised.
No regret at all?
I don't want to sound cold. Regrets. I'm sorry people died. Particularly people who weren't engaged in the conflict. A lot of innocent people were killed. But the IRA actions were against the British state and its agencies. That in the main, that's where the actions were directed. I would sound cold to say no regrets. Of course I have regrets. I have regrets about the death and suffering. But I still think something in that line had to happen because the British government wouldn't give change.
So what is the major goal today in terms of peace process in Northern Ireland?
I think people are now trying to actually try to argue what was the conflict about, who was to blame, why did it happen. So for me, the issue of the narrative is really our core problem today. You know, we didn't agree on Good Friday what caused the conflict. We just simply identified the symptoms of it and had to agree how to resolve those symptoms. Now I think we're back almost to the future where we're arguing, well, how was it caused? Maybe that's a therapy thing that people need to go through, political therapy. And I don't mean to minimise that. I don't believe I'll ever agree with somebody or vice versa, the cause of our conflict or who was precisely to blame or why to go on for so long. What I know is I wasn't born when the conflict was going on, but have a responsibility in my lifetime to bring it to an end. So that's my priority. My priority is not to work out what caused it. My priority is to work out to make sure it's finished.
So 20 years ago, you both wouldn't be able to sit alongside each other like that, right?
With great difficulty, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, even from a personal point of view, that people would have seen me as a traitor sitting down with Alex because he represented the Republican movement. But the reality is that he went to the ballot box, he stood for an election, and he's a political mandate, he's an elected representative, same as myself. So I have absolutely no problems sitting down with anybody who wants to go along the democratic way, because but it's been people like Alex and others who have helped to take the gun out of Irish politics, and that was our biggest problem for hundreds of years.
This is amazing to see you guys sit along each other.
Yep.
And I don't know if you both realize it, you both agree with each other more than disagree.
Actually, the next stage of this process, I hope he'll buy me a coffee.
I thought I was going to say that I would join Sinn Féin.
Well, that's the next objective.
ความขัดแย้งในแต่ละพื้นที่ย่อมมีลักษณะเฉพาะที่แตกต่างกันออกไปเราคงไม่สามารถที่จะหยิบวิธีการปรองดองของประเทศหนึ่งแล้วนำมาใช้ได้ทั้งหมดแต่สิ่งที่เราได้จากกระบวนการสันติภาพของไอร์แลนด์เหนือก็คือการสร้างความปรองดองไม่ใช่การทำให้ทุกคนในสังคมคิดเหมือนกันทั้งหมดแต่เป็นการเรียนรู้ที่จะอยู่ร่วมและเข้าใจคนที่คิดต่างค่ะพบกันใหม่สัปดาห์หน้าวันนี้สวัสดีค่ะ